I've pretty much been seeing people ask this question ever since Super Bowl 53, and that question is Julian Edelman a Hall of Famer? There are definitely arguments of why he should be, and then there are arguments why he should not be. If you're asking me, I would ultimately vote yes. I know, shocker. But actually, trying to keep my bias completely out of it, I do think there is a strong argument for him to be a Hall of Famer. But I also understand that, there are very valid points on the opposite side of that. So I'm going to do my best to break that all down. Kind of a random topic, but again, with no current sports, anything going on at the moment, I have a chance to get a bit more creative and address some stuff that I haven't or that I want to. So I think it's pretty obvious when I say that the biggest argument for him being in the Hall of Fame are his postseason numbers. It's a stigma that playoff Edelman is just different. He performs in the biggest moments, the biggest games, and it always seems like he is part of the highlight or signature plays of the biggest games. Just to give you some numbers real quick, in his 19 playoff games, his totals are 118 receptions, 1,442 yards, and 5 touchdowns. In only 19 games, those are some pretty massive numbers, and it's undeniable that when the spotlight is shining brightest, Edelman performs. Those reception and yards totals put him second all time in the postseason, only behind the great Jerry Rice. And it's my opinion that, regular season numbers are great, and it's a huge consideration to be part of the Hall of Fame. Can you perform season in, season out? At a consistent level, all the way through. But you also have to give major consideration to the people who perform beyond the regular season into the playoffs, because at the end of the day, everybody is gunning for that Lombardi trophy. Everybody wants that. That is the goal. And I think players who perform at their best and put up huge numbers during those games, that's just something you can't ignore. Rings are also a consideration here, and Jules has 3. But I think it's important to take a look into those specific Super Bowls and ask yourself, was he an integral part of that Super Bowl victory? Well, let's go through it. Super Bowl against Seattle. Keep in mind, this is one of the best defenses of all time. 9 catches, 109 yards, go-ahead touchdown in the fourth quarter. Atlanta, Super Bowl 51. 5 catches, 87 yards, including that incredible, one of the best catches you'll ever see, with 3 defenders surrounding him, keeping it off the ground somehow. He was the second leading receiver on the team that night, and he was a huge part of that comeback effort. Super Bowl 53 against the Rams. 10 catches, 141 yards. Super Bowl MVP. Now, when you look at each one of these games, I think it's very fair to say that if Jules doesn't perform the way he does, there are different outcomes for all 3 of those games, especially 49 and 53. And, again, 49 against that incredible defense, and 53, the Rams defense was no joke either, and he was running wide open the entire game. And he was a very deserving winner of that MVP award. And again, that Super Bowl MVP furthers his playoff resume. Another thing that's working for him is the legacy of it all. Throughout the second half of the Patriots dynasty, he has been Brady's top target at wide receiver. I don't know if that's necessarily fair to take that into consideration, but I think that it should. This was the greatest dynasty of all of North American sports, in the history of everything. And being Brady, the greatest quarterback of all time, being his number 1 wide receiver for that stretch of time, I think there's a legacy element here that does help Edelman's case. Again, just the highlight catches, when you hear the name Julian Edelman, are there moments that pop into your head that really stick out? And a little bit of, I'm repeating myself a little bit here, but again, Super Bowl 49, go-ahead touchdown with just a few minutes left. 51, that incredible catch on the ground. Not a moment, but the game of 53, where he was running around wide open the entire game. He was a first down machine, and without that performance, we don't win at all. He had over half of Brady's passing yards, and like I said, we don't get the W if he doesn't ball out like that. Another one that comes to mind is the pass to Amendola against the Ravens. I don't know if that's necessarily fair, but if you look at it this way, if there are 2 Julian Edelmans, right? They have the same numbers, same everything, but one of them has all of these highlight plays and memorable moments and the other doesn't, the voters are going to go with the guy who has those type of moments. A huge thing going against him is he has very modest regular season numbers. And that's not to say they're bad, but when we're talking Hall of Fame, we're talking about the best of the best. And Julian Edelman's regular season numbers don't really reflect that. And a lot of that is due to injury, which is another thing that's going against him. Edelman has only played 3 full seasons. He's only had 3 seasons where he's played all 16 games. And it might tarnish him in some voters' eyes because there are intangibles with each player that give them that Hall of Fame quality. And one of them is being durable. Can you rely on the guy to get on the field and perform? And if he's not always on the field, if he's not reliable because of his body, that's something they may take into consideration. I think a lot of people get the terms durability and toughness confused because Edelman is one of the toughest mother effers like I've ever seen play. He's scrappy as hell. He's always fighting for extra yards. He's putting his body on the line, which is contributing to his deteriorating health and injuries. But nonetheless, I think that's another thing that people look into. Is he a competitor? And, I think Edelman is one of the hardest working guys in the league, and I think that is worth something. You also have to keep in mind that Edelman's not done yet. How many good years does he have left? No idea. But he's not done yet, so he's going to add to these numbers. So hopefully by the end of everything, his regular season numbers are going to look a little bit better, alongside his awesome postseason numbers. But I hope that helps his case because I do think he deserves to be there. Another thing that's going against him is he has 0 Pro Bowls. I was thinking about this as I was typing up, stuff I wanted to talk about during this. That's shocking. I had completely forgotten. So do those matter? Yes, to a degree. And, again, I don't know exactly who's voting on these things, but I'm sure some hold different things to different degrees of value. I'm sure there are voters who look at the 0 Pro Bowls and they say, nope, he's not getting in. 0 Pro Bowls, like, no way. And I'm sure there are other voters who say, well, okay, but he's still had really good seasons. And also, it's just not that important to me. But in my opinion, I think Edelman's been snubbed out of a couple. And he doesn't deserve it every year by any means. But I think there's 3 seasons in particular that he was definitely snubbed out of a Pro Bowl spot. And again, I don't necessarily think this is a huge deal, but when you see the number 0, that can turn some people off for sure. But 2013, 105 catches, 1,056 yards, 6 touchdowns. Seems like a Pro Bowl effort to me. 2016, 98 catches, 1,106 yards, 3 touchdowns. Again, touchdown numbers could have definitely been higher, but those are Pro Bowl numbers, I'm sorry. And then this past year, I think he was definitely snubbed. He had 100 catches, career high in yards with 1,117 and 6 touchdowns. And I know he did lead the league in drops, and that's something to consider. But when you look at who else made the Pro Bowl this year, Tyreek Hill, again, very talented player. Do I like him? That's another story. Very talented, can't deny that. He got hurt in one of the early weeks and he missed. So when you look at his numbers and you see someone like that who made it over him, I think that's a total snub. Another thing that may go against him is the whole PED thing. He did have that 4-game suspension. Now, will that turn people off? Maybe. But honestly, when you see guys like Jerry Rice who have admitted to have cheated before, he used Stickum. He's on the record saying that. But most people, when they talk about Jerry Rice, they still see him and view him as one of the greatest receivers ever, if not the greatest receiver ever. And if he's a known cheater and he's in the Hall of Fame, does it really matter? And, if Edelman becomes a repeat offender, then that's a bit more serious. I'm just saying, and I'm not trying to justify the PED use either, but I'm just saying if the greatest ever can cheat, then I don't think that a PED suspension should keep someone from getting in. And again, I don't really think that this is a huge thing, but I do think it's worth saying Edelman getting in as an original 7th round draft pick who was a QB in college, that is such a good story. A lot of shit is driven by good storylines, and that is a good ass storyline. So I think that's something worth talking about. Does that sway someone's vote? I have no idea, but it is worth mentioning. But at the end of the day, when you've had such an impactful career with the greatest dynasty ever, you've won the MVP on the biggest stage, you have the rings, you have the postseason numbers, you've had good regular seasons, the top target for the greatest quarterback ever for the second half of his career. I just think that's too much to ignore. His postseason resume is just too gaudy. And again, keep in mind, he is not done yet. He is going to add to those regular season stats and hopefully playoff stats. I don't know how much more. Again, it depends on how long he plays, but I'm hoping he can still beef up both the regular season and postseason numbers. But do I think he will be in the Hall of Fame? Yes, I do. Do I acknowledge the arguments for and against him? Yeah, I do. And I think some of the arguments against him are very valid. But again, for the reasons I stated, I am a yes. What do you guys think? Do you think Julian Edelman is or will be a Hall of Famer? Comment below, let me know. As always, like and subscribe, and yeah.